everyone, I'm Ciprian Borodescu, AI Product Manager at Algolia, and I'm super excited to be here. And my goal with this presentation is to get you excited as well about the topic that I'm going to share with you in this session. I'm passionate about helping us, developers, succeed through the use of AI. And AI personalization was the topic that I presented at the keynote this morning, entitled 7 Dysfunctions of Personalization Engines. This session right now is a continuation of that one, and it's more practical and interactive, as I'm going to show you how you can orchestrate intent-based personalized experiences with ease, but also ask you some questions on Slido, and I'd love for you to participate. And of course, you can also use the chat to ask questions, because part of the team at Predict is here to help. As a quick summary, for those that didn't attend the keynote this morning, we talked about personalization as being the holy grail of customer experience. However, while everyone seems to talk about it, very few really know how to do it right. And there's a good reason for that. Personalization is not a tick box exercise. It's a complex undertaking because it needs to respect user privacy. It needs to be real time. It needs to support user identity consistency across sessions, user states, and devices. It needs to be able to predict user intents. It needs to be composable or API first. It needs to be transparent in terms of model metrics and business metrics. And last but not least, it needs to be ethical or responsible in the way it's being used and applied. Not really a walk in the park, is it? These are the 7 main pillars of a performant personalization engine that we had identified. And for the past year, we've been working on a new product, which will be released in private beta soon, that does just that. And I'm gonna demo it in just a few minutes. But I wanna pause for a moment to invite you for a quick poll on Slido. I'm curious to know, what are the biggest problems you encountered when building personalized end user experiences? So please join on Slido. You also have the link in the chat. And let's see a couple of answers in there before we continue with the presentation. And you can think about situations and scenario where you noticed any issues when building personalization in your company. If you have ever implemented personalization yourself. But even if not, why not? Is it because it was too hard? Was it because it was taken care by the merchandising department or marketing department or any other department out there? Are they actually satisfied with the results? I would love to hear from you what you're seeing out there. So we have some answers coming in. Responsive design is one of them. Consistent ID versus privacy, which of course overlaps with the 7 dysfunctions that I've presented this morning. We also have some new ones. Scalability. I would love to hear more about the context of responsive design being a problem when building personalized end user experiences. Can you elaborate on the chat for us? It would be interesting, because in these sessions, especially in the demo lab, of course, we're here to show you how we're thinking about the future of personalization and the future of Algolia. But the goal is also for other developers to learn from, those that are contributing with this poll. So let's get some sharing going on the chat. And it's interesting to understand why or why not. Why you're doing personalization or why not. Why not doing personalization. All right, while some more answers are coming in, I think we can move on with the presentation. Thank you for those that actually contributed with the answers. So hacking, our goal is not hacking personalization, as the title of this presentation goes, because this is what the industry has been doing thus far. And it doesn't necessarily produce optimum results. Instead, our goal was and still is fixing personalization. And you already posted on Slido some of the issues that need to be addressed. In fact, I can see that other answers are coming in, so thank you for that. So we do that we're fixing personalization with Algolia Predict, which is scheduled for private beta at the end of this year. If you want to get early access, you can register using this link right here. And I'll personally reach out to you for next steps. Now, before diving into some Predict demos, let's take a step back and talk about our mission at Algolia, which is to power discovery. That can be accomplished in two ways. One, understanding the content that needs to be put in motion, where we do an excellent job with Algolia Search and Algolia Recommend. The second part is understanding the user, for which the content needs to be put in motion. And that's where Algolia Predict comes in as the user-centric product at Algolia, the source of truth for the user object inside of Algolia. Essentially, Predict enriches end-user profiles with predictive properties such as affinities, buying power, funnel stage, and more in the future. And we're doing that to empower you developers to orchestrate intent-based personalized experiences such as search personalization, personalized recommendations, and even powering segmentation for the merchandiser. And here's the thing. Already, our pilot customers experimented with Predict and got very exciting results. 35% increase in their click-through rate, 5% increase in their conversion rate, and overall 1.5% increase in the total revenue. Now, the moment we've been waiting for. It's time to dive deeper and see how you can actually use Predict. There are 3 essential steps, as you see in this video right here. Step 1, choose the machine learning model. Why? Because you want to understand what are the intents that you want to know about your users. As you can see from the Predict dashboard, we have 3 models right now. Predictive affinities, which answers the question, what are my users' current and future preferences, like in terms of categories, subcategories, or attributes, or characteristics such as brand, size, color, gender, and others. The second model is predicted order value or the buying power. This answers the question, how much are my users likely to spend in this or next session? And finally, predicted funnel stage, which answers the question, where are my users in the buying funnel and what are they going to do next? Are they going to view or add to cart or perhaps abandon cart or transact? Once you select the model that you want to train, and let's say that you decided to use predictive affinities, it's time to connect two main data sources. One, you want to connect your clickstream or events data source, which especially for e-commerce companies or e-commerce websites and applications, that comes from Google Analytics 4.0, 360 via BigQuery. And of course, we're going to support other connectors like Kisha mentioned. The second data source is, in fact, the index that you already have for your Algolia search implementation. And of course, there are other configurations that you can do, like setting up affinities that you want this specific machine learning model to predict. Then you start the training. It's important to note at this point that in building these models, we ingest item attributes such as category, subcategory, brand size, color, and so on, and user attributes or user properties such as device, browser, session duration, frequency of visits, previous orders, even if those exist. All in all, what you need to understand is that we're working here with over 50 parameters that help us accurately predict user intent. And this is way beyond any standard personalization engine you're going to see out there. It will take a few minutes for the model to train, depending on the volume of data that you have. And once it's finished, predictions will be generated and available for each and every end user profile, like you see here. Now, of course, you can manually inspect predictions in the dashboard, but you also have access in the API. As you can see in this Postman collection, for each and every user, I have access to predictive affinities, each with their own probabilities between 0 and 1. You're going to see immediately funnel stage predictions, such as product view, add to cart, or transaction, again, between 0 and 1. And of course, the buying power that gives you a number with a certain probability. Now, since you know all of this, you can also use predictions to segment your users based on predicted intents. And here's where you can see a list of segments that I've created, each with their own definition. For example, for the first segment here, we have users that have an add to cart probability between 50% and 90%. Over here, we've defined another segment that consists of users more likely to be interested in Michael Kors items. And the last one, a group of users interested in black items for women. Now, we've seen how to set it up from the dashboard. We've seen the output of the models in the API, but the real value of these predictions is actually using them to personalize the experience of your end users. So let's now quickly look at 4 use cases of using Predict with Algolia Search, Algolia Recommend, Algolia Merchandising Hub, and even using it with other third-party platforms out there. Okay. So the first personalization strategy that I'm going to explore here is using predicted order value, or the buying power, from Predict to re-rank search results based on users' buying power. On the right-hand side, I have the possibility to personify various end users, each with their own characteristics and buying power. Notice the user artist that has $200 buying power, user gamer with $80, and user able, which has over $500 buying power. And you've noticed that as I'm changing from one user to another, there's no personalization happening to the results page. And we're going to change that now. As you can see on the left-hand side, I already imported the Predict React library. And by the way, all Predict packages are available on the NPM registry. Below, we can see and use the use predict hook that gives us access to the user profile, as well as the predictions, in this case, affinities and predicted order value. Because we want to re-rank items based on the buying power of a user, the first thing that I need to do is to define a price range. $25 to $50 and $50 to $75. Then I need to map the buying power to one of the three price ranges, like so. Finally, I can do two things. One, I can filter the search results based on each user's affinities, because remember, we also have affinities. And finally, re-rank items based on the buying power, like so. Now on the right-hand side, when I'm shifting from one user to another, I can see how the results are personalized to match each user affinities and buying power. This is the user artist with items between 25 and 50. This is the user gamer with items between 10 and 25. And finally, user Apple that has more expensive items. By the way, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. Let's see now how we might apply a similar personalization strategy, but instead of applying it on search results, this time we want to apply it on the list of recommended items. And for that, as you can see now, we're finding ourselves in the product detail page where there's a recommendation widget coming from Algolia Recommend. And as I'm changing the user to user gamer that has $80 buying power, the items that are being recommended are still way over his spending likelihood. Similarly, with user Apple, notice the $900 product item that's being recommended, which is almost double the buying power of this user. So we want, for the recommended widget, to display only those items that are within this user's budget. So to accomplish that, as shown previously, we import the Predict React library, like so, and we then get access to the predict order value through the use predict hook. You already know that by now. And of course, we use that as numeric filters to filter out all items that have a price that's greater than the buying power of that user, like so. Now on the right-hand side, once the page is refreshed, I can see items that are less than $500 in value, which is the buying power of the user Apple I personified earlier. There you go. We can, of course, check this for user artist. And as you'll see in a moment, you have to be careful. with situations where there's only one item that satisfies that condition. The solution here would be to re-rank items based on the buying power and not necessarily filter them out. All right. We've seen how Predict can be used in combination with Algolia Search and Algolia Recommend to orchestrate personalized strategies. And I already mentioned that you can use these predictions to create your own segments, either via the API or the dashboard. And these segments can be used with Algolia Merchandising Hub to define various rules, such as promoting items or hiding items or displaying banners only for certain groups of users. That's the key, only for certain segments. Lastly, Predict can be used with other third-party platforms out there. And here you see how it's being used to reduce the cart abandonment probability. On the top of the page, the banner offering free shipping is triggered when the cart value is close to the buying power of that user. And the chat window is triggered when the cart abandonment probability is over 50%. Now, one last thing that I want to mention is that in talking with various developers, and I would love to hear your thoughts as well, developers that were tasked with orchestrating especially sophisticated personalized strategies, we realized that it's difficult to debug what users will in fact see and how their experience might look like, and have the confidence that what's happening on the end user side is relevant from a personalization perspective. So for that, we're building the Predict Tools Chrome extension, which allows developers to personify individual user profiles or segments of users and evaluate their experience on the fly. As a quick teaser, this is how it looks. As expected, you have affinities, you have buying power and fun on stage, and when you change users, you see how their experience changes as well. We believe this is a tool that can be used by developers and merchandisers alike, as it represents the common ground for simulating and evaluating personalized end user journeys with confidence. Now, I do realize that we covered a lot in this session, so I encourage you to look it up again once the recording is going to be available on our YouTube channel. In closing, I just want to reiterate that you can get access to Algolia Predict, which is scheduled for private beta at the end of this year. Use this link to join the waiting list, and you'll get your chance to play with it before it goes public for everyone. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to drop them in a chat, as the Predict team, part of the Predict team is already here, ready to assist you. Let's check the chat. Okay, I see Vayed, Chamam. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. Thanks, that's super impressive. Thank you. I'm curious to understand what part, which of the, let's say, components that I presented were the most impressive for you and why. Then I noticed that you also have another question here. Would the user need to be logged in for this personalization to be effective, or does it also work on any visitor? And I think that Alexandra was nice to answer. Thank you for helping, Alex. Yes, indeed, it works for visitors as well. And the reality is that the reality of machine learning actually is that the accuracy of, let's say, first-time visitors versus the accuracy of returning users is going to be lower. And the best accuracy that you can get out of a machine learning model is when you have a lot of context and a lot of data on that user. That usually happens when it's a returning user, but also authenticated, and also the one that is producing, generating orders. So maybe having a history of purchases. Tassin is asking, where can I access the list of endpoints for segments and user profiles? This is something that we can share with you. And by the way, if you are interested in getting access to the API and all of that, all the documentation that we have, remember this product is now in private beta, but just go on that link and I'm going to personally reach out to you to give you the necessary access. Tassin also asks, how is the probability calculated? And Alexander already answered over there. So the models are indeed trained on analytics data. And we use, like I mentioned, especially for e-commerce use cases, Google Analytics 4 or 360. We also use the catalog items that you have uploaded in Algolia. And so I also mentioned in the presentation that we, all in all, I think we have over around 50 parameters that we're taking into consideration to calculate those predictions. And in the dashboard, after you set up your models and after the models have been trained, you will also have access to, I would say, advanced section where you can analyze the metrics of the model as well. So we like to do these things in a transparent way, because remember, that's one of the major pillars at Predict. Okay. Let's see, we have new questions. Ayush, great session. Thank you, Ayush. Chris Moyer is asking, are there ways to send other backend events to help indicate what a success is other than just a click? Yes, of course. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a backend. For example, even in Google Analytics, you have multiple events that you can send. And we're taking into consideration, for example, events such as classical standard events. Just to give you an example, standard events like adding to the cart or removing from the cart, abandoning the cart, and so on and so forth. Do you think it would be useful for us to also offer the possibility for us to support additional custom events that you might want to set up from the dashboard or using a different way? Just let us know, Chris. Specifically, I'm talking about non-user initiated events, like open email, non-user, like open email or other events not from a user logged in the session. That's a good point. And what I can say right now from the top of my mind, we can support, the idea would be to support multiple data sources at the same time. So to combine data sources. So for example, if you're combining Google Analytics data with MailChimp data or any other newsletter provider out there, that provider most probably tracks events like open email or click inside of the newsletter or email and stuff. And we are going to ingest those events, and we're going to use them into the machine learning model. That's the goal. Does it make sense, Chris? Okay, does Yannick Mueller, does Algolia recommend also work for non-e-commerce use cases? Yes, I know that the team is exploring that part of making recommended available work for media companies or even software as a service B2B situations and scenarios. Okay, so you were actually meaning predict. Yes, it's the same thing. Yes, we're starting with e-commerce for obvious reasons, but yeah, the idea would be to have it also for other types of companies, use cases, industries. Are you thinking of something specific? Can you help me understand what non-e-commerce use case you have in mind? Nick is asking, when a user makes a lot of searches to buy something, which query ID must be sent with a conversion event at checkout? Which query ID? Okay, which query ID is important for Algolia Predict to first predict the first, the last, or we could send multiple queries IDs at the same time? So I would answer this question is it's a bit loaded, but everything comes from the data source, and so the goal is to have Predict to listen to multiple data sources, not only Google Analytics, not only events ingestion from our own Algolia capability of tracking events, but also other third-party data tracking platforms out there. Think about Adobe Target, think about Segment, and so on and so forth. And so if you use a tracking system, let's say like events ingestion in our case, Algolia's case, that tracks queries and so on, we will take that data source and that information into consideration. Now, the question of which of the queries weigh more into the final prediction, the output, that depends on the customer, depends on the type of data, depends on the queries and so on. Ideally, you would want to have this kind of information in an analytics section inside of Algolia. Nick, let me know if that answered your question a little bit. By the way, if any of the Predict team is still here, please please type in the chat if you have another perspective on Nick's question. What is a use case of B2B? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if that's addressed to me or it ties back to the question on predict and potentially recommend using non-e-commerce use cases. For B2B, okay. From the top of my mind, we do have other machine learning models that are work in progress that are more suitable for the B2B scenarios. But out of the machine learning models, these 3 machine learning models that we support right now, right? Affinities and buying power and funnel stage, depending on how your website is structured or mobile application, there are multiple dimensions here, but I'm just making stuff up now, just for the sake of the conversation. you could be using, especially if it's a frequent buyer, you could be using the buying power. You could be using affinities to understand if that user, to understand that user preferences. But like Alexandra mentions here, B2B, when you are dealing with B2B, you have to have a lot of data. Machine learning models usually are data hungry. And so, again, we do have some machine learning models that are work in progress that are addressing use cases, specific B2B use cases. One of the classic B2B use case is churn prediction. That's also something that we're planning on doing. But not only this one. There are others that are more appealing. But I'm just sharing a use case which is quite popular. Again, you can also share your the scenario that you have in mind. Any plan for a debug SDK that can be embedded in the back office of e-commerce marketplaces as a more integrated supplement to the Chrome extension could be useful for impersonation workflows? Okay, that's interesting. We're currently focusing on building and extending, if you will, the Chrome extension, which is for end user, for personifying end users. But I would love to understand more about the use case that you have in mind. Please, all of you guys, thank you so much. Thank you for posting all these questions. If any of you are interested in exploring this, going deeper into these use cases to see what's possible and what's not, to help us build this product or any components, please register at the link that you see over here. And I'm going to personally reach out to you for the next steps. I think, Betty, we only have about 5 minutes. And let me know, guys, if you have any, guys and girls, if you have any other questions. Let's see if I missed anything. Yeah, I think this is about Mike. Okay. Which performance metrics will there be shown that Predict is working well? And we will be able to use the integrated Algolia A/B testing feature to prove the success of Predict. Yes, this is a very good question. Thank you for that, Mike. I'm going to start with the second part of the question. Yes, you can use Algolia A/B testing, but in fact, you can use other A/B testing tools out there as well. With Algolia Predict, we want to be part of the data ecosystem, and we want to communicate and with other platforms and other platforms to communicate with us. And so, for example, in our pilot, with our pilot customers, we had situations where they were using Google Optimize, which is an A/B testing tool. So whatever you use inside of your company, that's something that we can set up, or it's something that Predict can be set up with as an A/B testing. In terms of performance metrics, you should expect the classic F1 score. You should expect false positives, true positives, and so on and so forth. You want to know if those predictions that are being used produce business results as well. So you have two types of metrics. One that are the first type, which is technical metrics, so that you know that this is in fact machine learning and it's actually legit. So we make it transparent like that. And the second type of metrics is business metrics, because you want to see, usually, for example, in e-commerce, you, from what we've seen from our pilot customers, you're using, they're looking at KPIs such as average order value, click-through rate, conversion rate. And I would encourage you to also take a look at the 7 dysfunctions of personalization engines. I'm giving over there an example of how you need to look at all the context of all of these metrics to basically understand where the value is coming from. Because you might see that the click-through rate that is increasing in a variant, in your experiment variant, but the average order value decreases. And maybe the conversion rate increases. So you don't need to, or it would be a mistake to only look at one KPI. So yeah, long answer, but basically both technical and business performance metrics will be in the Predict dashboard. Thanks for the question, Mike. All right, I think we're at time.